welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. Judge Fudge presiding. Ladies and gentlemen, this is On Trial, brought to you by the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I'm going to try to get through this podcast without coughing my brains out. I'll do the best I can. Of course, I am your host, your mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, I am defending one of my guilty pleasures as far as movies go. I love the Rocky series because, God damn it, that's how winning's done. And Rocky 4 it means more to me now than it ever has because I showed it to my son and he loved it. And so that has brought us closer together. But even before Jonas, I've always had a special place in my heart for Rocky 4. It's a silly movie, but a great one. One that's fun to talk about. It's got its problems, but it's got its high points too. It's certainly got its critics, but it's got its defenders. And tonight I will be in the position of defending the movie from whatever our second co-host here, our prosecutor, has to offer. Ladies and gentlemen, again, prosecuting Rocky 4 tonight is Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Hey, everybody. I'm Sean. You're not. And hide your fucking sacred 80s cow. Because I'm coming with a chainsaw.
You're about something about the Ash Raw, Limp Bizkit, break stuff. All right, let's move on.
Oh, God. Come into my house and throw Limp Bizkit back at me.
I'm a fucking chainsaw. Something about your ass raw. I can't remember what he says there. All right, anyway. All right, let's go ahead. So Rocky 4 came out in 1985, November, on a budget of $28 million. It ran for a box office of $300 million. And a few years later, the Berlin Wall would come down and the Cold War would end. So the joke here is that Rocky 4 ended the Cold War. Rocky 4 defeated communism. It's probably a little more complicated than all of that. And now that I know, and so that I've thrown that out there, we're going to try to refrain from doing that bit tonight if we can. You know, Rocky 4 defeated communism. It punched it right in the face. We get it. It makes me laugh. It makes you laugh. It makes everybody laugh. Let's turn the page and actually look at the film critically. First, notes. Sean?
You know what? In part, I'm always going to be convinced that this movie came about not because Sylvester Stallone had an idea for a Rocky movie, but because he heard somebody's bitchin' 80s hard rock mixtape. And he just loved it that much that he figured, I gotta score this person some points and make this a soundtrack. I know, I'll concoct a Rocky movie. Over the 5-day Thanksgiving Day weekend in 1985, it grossed a total $31.8 million, combined $127.8 million in the United States and Canada, and $300 million worldwide over the course of its entire run. That made it not only the highest-grossing Rocky film, but it was also the highest-grossing sports film of all time until The Blind Side unseated it in 2009. And not by exactly what I would call a whole lot, by $309 million without accounting for inflation. After it was made, in kind of reflecting on it, Sylvester Stallone once said that he wanted to make another movie, which was all about Drago and what happened to him after boxing, with Rocky's story just kind of running parallel to that. But he kind of ruled that out because of all the possible justifications. He said it wouldn't make sense because both boxers beat the shit out of each other so badly that it would render them, quote, incapable of reason. And so that hence inspired, Rocky V as a cautionary tale against the dangers of boxing. Fuck your bullshit with Rocky going to the isolation of Russia to train. It was shot in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. And the PNE Agrodome at Hastings Park in Vancouver, British Columbia, doubled as the giant Soviet arena that housed the bout. One of the most famous behind-the-scenes stories about this is that Dolph Lundgren and Sylvester Stallone, respectively Ivan Drago and, of course, Rocky Balboa, made their boxing scenes completely authentic for the first portion of the fight. They were actually hitting each other because Stallone wanted to kind of capture as much realism as possible. And Lundgren, of course, agreed to it. The one thing is of in the pantheon of action stars, Dolph Lundgren is, of all people, this Scandinavian man with, I believe, a chemical engineering degree, is actually a very legit martial artist. And in fact, one shot to Stallone's chest slammed the man's heart against his breastbone, caused it to swell up, and put him in intensive care with labored breathing and blood pressure topping 200. Had to be flown from the set to St. John's Regional Medical Center in Santa Monica from the set in Canada. So not exactly a hop, skip, and a jump around the corner. He spent just over a week in hospital and would later say that in the no shit statement of all time that Dolph Lundgren had all of the talent and athleticism needed to probably be a force in professional heavyweight boxing. Of course, that also came at another cost, and that was it nearly ran Carl Weathers off of the movie. Again, this was very physical, very intense, and while they were filming the Apollo versus Drago exhibition bout, Lundgren went a little bit overboard, tossing Weathers into the corner, after which Carl let loose with a string of profanities, left the ring, and proclaimed that he was calling his agent and doing what he had to do to get out of the movie entirely. Stallone had to force the two men to reconcile to end a 4-day work stoppage. And at that, of course, Lundgren had to be kind of told, take it down a notch. Just you're running at about 11, gonna need you at about a 6. One thing I will give the movie completely unironic credit for is the sound effects from those punches are actually 100% genuine. As are the training methods that the boxing consultants concocted. It was very much progressive in really kind of showing off and portraying just how a high-tech and innovative sports equipment was becoming by that point. In fact, a lot of what was shown in the movie was considered experimental. It was unproven at the time, and it would be about another 2 decades before Olympians like Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte, apologize if I didn't pronounce his name correctly, the guy who fucked off in Brazil and became a national embarrassment, admit that those training sequences were what inspired them to retreat to kind of a similar cabin to what Rocky used in order to train. But anyway, in any case, your typical kind of all-star cast. You've got all the usual suspects from past movies. Stallone, Talia Shire is back as Adrian, Burt Young is back as Paulie, Carl Weathers in his final appearance as Apollo Creed, the aforementioned Mr. Lundgren as Captain Ivan Drago, Brigitte Nielsen as Ludmila Vobet Drago, his wife and supporter, and the assumed steroid broker. Tony Burton is back as Tony Duke Evers, and Michael Pataki plays Nikolai Koloff. Not going to speculate whether somebody was a wrestling fan. Drago's trainer, promoter, and manager. And also this movie is quite possibly best known for James Brown, the godfather of soul, contributing one of the greatest movie soundtrack moments of all time, "Livin' in America," as Apollo channels the old Creed one more time, and Ivan Drago just stands in the ring looking around like, what the fuck is this? I don't even. or whatever the Russian equivalent to that phrase would be. And that's it. That's about all the important stuff you need to know about Rocky IV before Mark and I go, what's the line from Living in America? Toe to toe, eye to eye.
I don't know. Jesse and I have been fond of saying "sort the mail" lately.
Sort the mail.
With that being said, I'm going to do a quick synopsis of this movie. There's not much to it.
No.
We begin at the end of Rocky III, where Stallone has adopted the old rope-a-dope method. Only he doesn't really he doesn't really rest on the ropes, as he does just walk around sticking his chin out, yelling "You ain't so bad" at Clubber Lang. As Clubber Lang then proceeds to take his head off and have an asthma attack in the process.
Mark, help me out with something, because I don't want to look this up, and there's the off chance you might remember this for me. Did this movie come out before or after Mr. T boxed Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 2?
This is 85?
Yeah.
This is the same year as WrestleMania. And Mr. T boxed Piper at WrestleMania 2.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So Rocky 3 came before. So Rocky 3 came before this one.
Rocky 3 came before. What do you call it? WrestleMania came well after Rocky 3.
I'm trying to figure out whose performance might have inspired who when it came to Rocky taunting Clubber.
Well, interestingly enough, Hulk initially left the WWF because he went to go film. I want to say it was the WWF. He went to go film Rocky 3, and there was a whole to-do about that.
Okay, I'm more mature than to sing the wrong song, but I will correct you slightly.
It's the AWA?
Well, what happened was he left the AWA because he went to go film his cameo in Rocky 3.
Right.
Gagne, I believe it was a combination, if I recall correctly from what I heard on the OSW podcast. I believe it was Gagne objected to, number one, Hogan doing the movie at all because he felt like he was making a joke of the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. And we all know how seriously Verne took that. And I believe it was a combination of that and Hulk wanting to capitalize on his popularity with merch and everything, and he couldn't come to terms with Verne on him being able to have a cut of it and have creative control. And as a result, Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't remember who the feud was with. Whether it was Vern in the AWA or Vince Sr. in the WWF. I know.
Well, yeah, because I believe it was as a result of that Vern decided, you know what, Mr. Balea, screw you. You're not going to be AWA champion. You're just going to chase the title. Hulk decided, okay, fuck a big wet bag of that noise, and he returned to the former WWF,
Right.
which was now, as opposed to him working for Vince Sr., he would be working for Vince Jr. in the World Wrestling Federation. Backlund, I believe, was injured prior to the planned rematch with the Iron Sheik. They slotted Hogan in instead, and
The rest is history.
The rest is Hulkamania.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so we're at the end of Rocky 3. He's blowing up Mr. T by having Mr. T spend all of his energy trying to knock out Rocky with one punch. And he takes advantage of a blown up Mr. T and finally knocks him out, regains the title. In the months or years or whoever knew it, the Rocky timeline's a little fucked up. Him and Apollo have their third fight in a gym underground behind a closet door that says "Beware of the Panther." And from there we follow Rocky at the end of that fight to his home. They celebrate Paulie's birthday. Paulie gets a robot. There's a lot of jokes that happen with all of this. I'm gonna spare you the jokes, but you know, if you for more of that, tune into last night's Metal Hammer of Doom, where we use the term "fuck robot" a lot. There's no place for that in this courtroom. Anyway, so Paulie's birthday, blah blah blah. This brings.
It's actually a thing.
This brings us to the introduction of our villain, which is amateur Soviet boxer Ivan Drago. And he is coming to America, quite literally, and they want to challenge... initially, they wanted to challenge Rocky, and Apollo steps up and says, no, you know, this is an opportunity here. He wants to challenge the Russian, so they do an exhibition bout in Vegas. That's the plan. Apollo and Rocky sort of have a discussion / argument over whether or not Apollo should really do this, whether or not he's too old, whether or not the Russian is too big. Why would Apollo want to risk his life and legacy against this unknown entity? But they go ahead and they do it anyway. And Apollo, of course, channels, you know, his... He did a similar, not so big, but he did a similar thing in the first Rocky where he came out in a boat and he was George Washington and all of that. You know, he's into these big Triple H entrances. He gets in the ring with Drago, and in 2 rounds, Drago murders him. Rocky has an opportunity to throw in the towel. Apollo says, "Don't do it, no matter what happens." Apparently preferring to die in the ring than to give up or be given up, as the case may be. So Apollo dies. Rocky murdered, rather, in the middle of the ring. And Ivan Drago is indifferent. He says if he dies, he dies. So Rocky, riddled with guilt and boiling over with anger, against the wishes of his own wife, decides not only will he fight the Russian, he will fight the Russian in the Soviet Union. Not only will he fight the Russian in the Soviet Union, but he will do so on Christmas Day. And no, that's about it. So he takes his burning heart, his heart that is on fire, and he takes it to somewhere in the Soviet Union. There's a cottage there for him to train in, and he trains in the elements. Meanwhile, Drivin' Drago has every piece of equipment, computerized or otherwise, and steroids to help him gain an even more of an advantage against the diminutive Sylvester Stallone. He's short, ladies and gentlemen, is what I'm trying to tell you. So you have Rocky training in the elements. Adrian eventually comes over, and like she always does, after being an utter nag and saying, "You can't win, Rock. I don't want you to do this. I know I married a boxer, but stop boxing. She finally comes to Rush and she says, well, if you'd like to commit suicide, I'll be happy to stand next to you. Terrific. So, hearts on fire, here we go. We finally get to the fight, and they do their version of the Apollo over-the-top entrance, which is a lot of singing of the Russian anthem, and a big poster of Ivan Drago. The Russians, they don't know marketing. Anywho, Rocky comes in, everyone's booing him. Boo, America, boo, Calvin Klein jeans, boo. So, the first round, Rocky gets tossed hither and thither. At one point, one of the announcers says he's just trying to survive the first round. Rocky takes blows that would knock a cow out, but he keeps on trucking. And they get to the second round. In the second round, Rocky fires a shot at Drago and cuts his eye. At which point, Duke says to Rocky, you see, he's not a machine. He's a man. He's not even a fuckbot. And
God, I hope he wasn't thinking about fucking Drago.
You never know. It was
Duke.
It was the 80s. It was a weird time. Anyway, meanwhile in Drago's corner, he has determined what we all knew is that Stallone is not a man. He's a piece of iron. A piece of steel. And so then we break into our 67th montage of the movie, which has them just going back and forth, blooding each other. It's just one round after one concussive blow after another. We finally get to the last round, and the crowd has turned in favor of Rocky. How could this small man in his Calvin Klein jeans and his apple pie and Nancy Reagan stand against this great Russian monster? But he has, and we love it. We love a good fight, no matter who we are, no matter where we live. Which, of course, is embarrassing the Soviet leadership, and so they send the one guy down there, and he says, "You're embarrassing us," and he hits him in the head, and Drago then throws him to the floor and says, "I fight for me, God damn it!" And then he loses. Rocky knocks him out. Okay, Rocky got knocked down 167 times, probably in one round. But Drago got knocked down once, couldn't get up again. Just want to make sure everyone understands what we're looking at here. So, Rocky wins the fight. He gets brain damage in the process, but that's the next movie. Any case, before we end, Rocky gives a speech, and he says, there are two guys trying to kill each other in this ring tonight. But I guess that's better than 20 million. Wah, wah. And if I can change, and you can change, we all can change. And everybody cheers. Yay! And he wishes his child a Merry Christmas because it's Christmas Day. And hearts on fire. We're into the credits, and that's the end of the great saga that is Rocky IV. You're a witness, sir.
You know something? When I talk to most people who really unabashedly love this movie, and by the way, okay, I first just have to say, Mark, when you say fuckbot, you and I clearly think of very different things.
It has been implied and joked about for years that Paulie was fucking that robot.
Well, it goes back to the old robot chicken bit. You can take the most innovative, cutting edge science in the world. It doesn't matter what it is. And the first thing that man is going to want to know is, can you fuck it?
That's right.
How can I conceivably stick my dick in this?
What is it? The first rule of the internet is there porn of it?
Rule 34. If it exists, there is porn of it.
Goddamn right.
And And for about 11 more days, Tumblr gets to prove it. Anyway, when I talk to most people who, for some reason, unabashedly love this movie, what always comes out of their mouth is something to the effect of, it's so cheesy and so bad that I just adore it. And I get that when it comes to a lot of movies. I get that that's why people love The Room. I get that that's why they love Birdemic and Starship Troopers and Showgirls, because somebody put forth honest to fucking God effort. Okay, all the movies except for Birdemic. That was clearly just that was clearly cashing it in. That was clearly, tanking. But somebody put forth honest to God effort, and as much as you don't want to make fun of them, it's just so charmingly inept that you just kind of can't help but love it in an oh bless your heart kind of way. For most movies and even some franchises, that would be okay. But this is Rocky we're talking about. Prior to Rocky IV, the 3 movies that came before it were all on some level or another legitimately inspiring, with a truly relatable tone. The first movie, you have somebody who has been written off, dismissed, never really given a chance his entire life by anybody, and then he gets that 1,000,000-to-1 shot where nobody even thinks he is going to last the entire fight, and he ends up nearly pulling it out. Not only does he go the distance, he almost beats the best in the world. And along the way, he also just he inspires everybody around him. He inspires a city. He becomes the quintessential underdog story. The second movie comes along, and he has to question what's actually worth fighting for, why he's actually doing this, and if he has a second chance at this, really, where are his priorities? Are they with the prospect of a happy relationship and a family, or is it about fame, fortune, championships, glory? And right when he makes his choice, Adrian turns around and says that she just wants him to go and do one thing now that she's going to be okay, and that's go out there and win. Go out there and live his dream. Make that happen.
Well, what are we waiting for? Sorry.
Yeah. Rocky III comes along, and you have the tale of a man who has lost his edge, who has forgotten what he was competing for, what always got him into the ring, what made him the man who got him to where he was. And he has to lose everything in order to understand what he had and what he has and what's permanent and what's there only for a short time for him to seize. It goes from being an underdog story to being a true comeback story. Those are all things that almost anybody at some point or another can look at and grasp on some level, because there's some kind of common thread, be it direct when it comes to sporting competition, or something more metaphorical, that I think runs through almost anybody's life at some stage. And then you get to Rocky IV, and it just becomes political caricature. It becomes low-hanging fruit. Look, there's a reason why I'm making professional wrestling jokes here. It's because, as Glow has illustrated so effectively, this was the order of the day in mid-'80s professional wrestling more than it was in actual professional sports. the idea that everything had to be the proud, stalwart, noble, and virtuous Americans versus the cold, godless, brutal, killing machine commies. I mean, that's what we're getting from Drago's droll declaration, if he dies, he dies. I mean, and let's be real here. As has been dictated a number of times, in real life, when a boxer inadvertently kills another one in the ring, it often fucks the surviving boxer up for life. Some are never the same from that point forward because they wanted to knock the man out. He didn't want to shuffle him loose this mortal coil. So Drago being that brutal about it is it strikes me as just a teensy bit of jingoistic exaggeration. So at that point, he's not even as believable an adversary already as Rocky, or not as Rocky, as Apollo or Clubber Lang. So it's already harder to invest in him as anything more than that. Apollo was first a proud champion who sells short his challenger and almost loses his title for it. Whether the fight was legitimate is called into question. His pride is called into question. And he realizes he has something to prove, so he wants the rematch. Believable. I can get behind that. Rocky III comes along, and Clubber is now the gritty underdog who is fighting his way up the ranks, having nothing handed to him, having to fight the meanest, baddest sons of bitches out there, and putting him down. And all the while, Mickey is sheltering the champ, dodging Clubber, giving Rocky tomato cans that he can easily beat to kind of pad his legacy. And then all of a sudden Rocky feels like he has something to prove when he realizes that. And lo and behold, Mick is kind of proven right. I mean, up to a certain point, it's even almost hard to really kind of regard Lang as the villain up until he starts really kind of getting personal and, taunting Rocky's wife and everything.
Hey, woman.
Yeah, because you realize the demeanor may be different, but he's basically the guy that we, in a sense, the same kind of archetype that we were rooting for in the first two movies. And here, I made the joke about Hulk Hogan, Nikolai Volkov, but really it's more like kind of a proto Hulk Hogan Sergeant Slaughter from WrestleMania 7 on about 6 years in advance. Because again, Rocky is the symbol of America. He's fighting for mom and apple pie and baseball and rock and roll and fax machines and the hula hoops and the MTV and everything and so on and so forth, and Yankee blue jeans. And it's so hollow. It really is. And yes, the soundtrack is fun. And yes, I will give the movie credit for this much, as I often do when we have to review these bad movies. It's fantastically shot. It was probably, up until Rocky Balboa, the best looking of the Rocky movies. It took the most leaps as far as cinematography. The sound mixing and editing was, as we said, much improved. They really wanted to push the envelope when it came to authenticity, and when it came to the mid 80s, and the advancements that were kind of coming around the bend, they really did nail it. But otherwise, it's something that's just too hard for me to invest in. If it had been just a standalone movie and not a Rocky movie, I might have thought a little bit more highly of it, just ever so slightly. But if I were on the borderline, it kind of pushes me the other way, because despite all the tropes, everything that I just mentioned just causes it, in my eyes, to not feel like a Rocky movie at heart. So, your witness.
It's low-hanging fruit to say things like, if you don't like Rocky, you hate America. I think people, when I pick this, expecting me to go whole hog into but this is the movie that defeated communism shtick. And I know that my defenses of certain movies can be a bit sticky, right, Catwoman? But but I'm actually going to defend the movie on its merits. I'm going to take a different tack here. So slightly less entertaining, but really more factual. It's a very simple movie. There's a reason why I showed this to my son first, and not, my son's being 4, almost 5. There's a reason why I showed it to him first, and not Rocky 3, not Rocky 2, not Rocky 1. Nobody would want to watch Rocky 5, and then not Rocky 6. It's a very simple story, because Sean just laid out all how each one of these Rocky movies is different. What is the plot? What is the driving force of your main character? He neglects to mention that there is a very simple and easy to recognize motivation in this that does exist. And it's not just pure jingoism. It's not a commercial for Americanism versus communism. It's very simply revenge. Okay? This monster unabashedly kills his best friend in the middle of the ring. If you look at the fight between Apollo and Drago, and you think about, if you watch, let's say, some MMA, if you've seen Mark Hunt, right? Mark Hunt is so good that he would knock people out and then walk away as they were falling down. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mark Hunt instinctually knew when the fight was over.
Mark Hunt decides.
Yes, Mark Hunt decides. Most boxers are not such vicious animals. I mean, there's a reason why it's called the sweet science. This isn't barbarism. There is a technical aspect to boxing. Most professionals are not just in there hammering people to death. They do their business. They score a knockdown. They're able to back away. They are in control of their emotions. This isn't a barroom brawl. That's the difference. And so, even if the story you're telling is that he was an amateur Soviet boxer, Drago should have possessed the ability to stop himself when he knew the fight was over. And let's face it, by the time we get to the point where Apollo can barely stand, number one, it's a little unrealistic they even let the fight go that long. But they did. That's part of the movie, and I'm not trying to prosecute the thing. I'm defending it. So, we're in this world, the refs are basically there as a decoration. They're there to direct traffic, I guess, not to stop fights. When someone has clearly lost. But going into that fight, what I'm trying to argue is that inherently Drago should have known when the fight was over. He makes an active decision to ignore those sportsmanlike instincts and decide to kill a man, which brings out the rage in Rocky. Let's remember who Rocky was. Rocky was a guy who broke people's legs for money before he had an opportunity to fight the heavyweight champion of the world. Okay? Rocky didn't like himself very much. Rocky, through most of the series, doesn't really like himself. He lived for Adrian, and when Adrian dies later on in the series, spoilers, he has a tough time going on living. He's very, even Paulie, who was a despicable character for most of the series, he sort of looks to as his better. Rocky kind of hates himself, but he has all these great achievements, and that part of his psyche, I don't ever think goes away, but it definitely gets buried. And what Drago does in this movie is bring that out of Rocky again. With all that rage and that inner hate. And so what this becomes, that even a 4-year-old picked up on, by the way, is that Rocky's friend was killed in the ring. Rocky rose to avenge his friend. That's it. That's the movie. Now, you may argue, like, well, that's not much of a movie, but aren't some of our best movies that are beloved simple revenge tales? We've had that argument on this show, as a matter of fact. We've had that argument on Long Road to Ruin. That some of the best movies that we know and love are simple revenge tales dressed up with a lot of boom, bang, smack, zap, wham! In both my prosecutions and defenses, I've actually brought that up. That so many of the movies that we love are extremely simple. They're just dressed up with a lot of brouhaha and yakety-schmackety. A lot of kung fu fighting. A lot of explosions, long, drawn-out car chases and action scenes. But when you boil them down, it's a man seeking revenge against another man. And that's the beauty of Rocky IV. Sean's not wrong. In the first one he was fighting for sense of self, and the second one he was fighting to see if he could, is he a one and done, or is he born to be a champion? In the third one, he was regaining, as the song says, the eye of the tiger. And in the fourth one, he's avenging his friend. Why do you think this resonates with people so much? Yeah, sure, at first blush, it's America versus communism, but this is 2018 and people still love this movie. So it has to resonate with them deeper than just the America versus Russia thing, because that's not... despite some of the Trumpier things happening in the world, that doesn't resonate with
Trumpier.
The whole America versus Russia thing doesn't really resonate with most people. But this story more so than I think any of the Rocky movies, other than people universally hate Rocky V, is the one everyone goes to. People don't even, people may bring up the Eye of the Tiger, but they don't necessarily reference Rocky III anymore. It's always Rocky IV that gets the most attention. And you could probably convince some younger folks that Rocky I and II don't exist. That this is the zenith, this is the peak of the Rocky franchise. Such to the point that when they were looking for a plot for Creed II, they mined Rocky IV. I think to dismiss the movie, as just a tale of jingoism is to ignore the fact that deep down inside, most of the people who have watched the Rocky franchise, this movie resonates with. This draws the widest audience. I think it's the most successful of all the Rocky movies, to be honest with you. I have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's the highest grossing.
Okay. And again, that can't just be because... it's not because of the acting. It's not because of the 87 montages. It's because the story of a man avenging his dead friend resonates with more people than I think we'd like to think it does. It's just some structural notes about the movie, some craft points. This is another movie that sounds and looks gorgeous. There's nothing wrong with it. Whether your enjoyment of Stallone's acting, is subject to person. But if you like Stallone, this is very much Stallone. In fact, this is probably Stallone in his most intelligible. Because if between the Rambo movies and the Rocky franchises, you have to wonder... did he go to the Kurt Cobain School of Enunciation? It's just, this is a common thing everyone makes fun of. Your two biggest action heroes of the arguably the two biggest action heroes of the 1980s were the most incomprehensible motherfuckers that ever utter dialogue. This is why Schwarzenegger didn't get a lot of speaking roles in the beginning. You know, these guys look good on camera, but Stallone spoke with marbles in his mouth. And Rocky IV arguably is most intelligible. This is the most coherent he's ever sounded. At least up to that point. He's gotten, I think, better in later years. Demolition Man.
Yeah, by right around Demolition Man or Judge Dredd. You can understand about every word.
Yeah, that stopped being a thing. But I said prior to that, like I said,
you betrayed the law.
Yeah, Rocky IV is again the one where he actually sounds like he's able to speak English. Dolph Lundgren, look, they weren't asking the man for a lot. They were asking him to look menacing. He was a monster. That's all he was supposed to be. And he does a great job of playing video game boss monster.
A slight point of order. I had no problem with Dolph.
Okay.
Dolph Lundgren is fine. I ain't saying shit about Dolph Lundgren, and not just because the man could eat me up and shit me out.
Okay. I mean, what's her face who plays Adrian plays the same role in all the Rocky movies.
Talia
She's
Shire.
fine. Yeah, Talia Shire. Burt, whatever his name is,
Burt Young.
Burt Young, who plays Paulie, plays the same role in every movie. He's fine. He has he's there for comic relief, and he makes me laugh. He makes me and the audience laugh in a couple of different scenes. Carl Weathers, again, everything I just said. So, from a structural, you have to give credit where credit is due. There's nothing wrong with the acting in this film. Everybody gives a par or above performance. The movie looks great. The movie sounds great. So all that's left to really attack, if you're looking at just the craft of the film, is the plot. And as I've said, it didn't need to be this overly complicated thing. You just needed to set up a adequate reason for Rocky to get back in the ring and take down a monster. And that is why Rocky IV is the most successful, the zenith, the best of the Rocky franchise.
Hang on a sec. I'm looking something up because I sort of want to address it in my argument, but I don't want to get it wrong.
Oh, by the way, and if you say anything against this movie, you hate America. Just kidding.
Okay, allow me to go ever so slightly academic with this. Those of us who have watched a lot of movies, read a lot of books, read plenty of comics, played a lot of video games, and probably also played a metric fuck ton of D&D, are familiar with the concept of something called the hero's journey. It's a concept popularized by author and thinker Joseph Campbell. And it posits that throughout human history, we have essentially been telling the same story a few thousand times. In fact, it's often called the hero with a thousand faces. And it goes that a lot of stories follow the same very general structure. So let's kind of take a look at this in terms of Rocky, at least in terms of the very first movie, if not the entire franchise. You have the ordinary world, which is where the hero exists before he begins the current story with no idea of what is about to befallen. In Rocky's case, that is his status as a club fighter and street thug in Philadelphia. So before he's a leg breaker for a loan shark. You have the call to adventure. Apollo's planned opponent has to drop out of the fight. They're looking for someone to take his place. Apollo has the brilliant idea, hey, let's take this absolute nothing, this club fighter, this never was, and we'll pit him against me. It'll be the most American tale this side of Five going west. You have the refusal of the call, which we could call Rocky probably being a little bit initially reluctant about it, even including, Mick being unwilling to train him. Meeting the mentor. Okay, to a certain extent, he's already met the mentor, but this is Rocky and Mick growing closer. Crossing the threshold. He's ready to act upon the call to adventure. He's ready to begin the quest. Depending on how you look at it, this could be Rocky training. This could be the moment when Rocky runs up the museum steps. It could be him quietly admitting to Adrian, all I want to do is go the distance. You have tests, allies, and enemies. Okay, so let's even kind of look beyond the first movie. The hero is outside of his comfort zone. He faces an escalating series of challenges that continue to test him. He meets new obstacles of some kind or another. After the first movie, Rocky has difficulty fully capitalizing on his fame. He can't hold down a job. He and Adrian are married with a son on the way. Apollo throws out the challenge. At first, Rocky doesn't want to accept it, but then Apollo begins an assault on his pride, and that drives him back to it. And Rocky just doesn't want it as badly. Something's missing. A little bit of that fire has dimmed as his true abilities are being tested, as Mickey is trying to push him to develop more speed, more technique, learn to fight right-handed, to throw him off from his southpaw stance. You have the approach to the inmost cave. In many cases, it's some kind of internal conflict the hero hasn't yet had to face, and it's part of the final preparations before, the big leap into the great unknown. You have, which you could call, probably if we're going to reach for anything in the second movie, it would probably be Adrian going into a coma after the birth of their son because of all the blood loss and all the strain that she was under. If you want to extend it to the third movie, you could say that it's the death of Mickey, losing his title, realizing that his fights were handpicked for him, and then realizing that he's not the man that he used to be, and he's not sure if he has it anymore. There's the reward, the moment when the hero seizes the sword. It's, he's defeated the enemy, he's beat back death, he's overcome his personal challenge, and he reaches a new state. If I had to say it was anything, I would say it would probably be Rocky III, when he just completely transforms as a fighter. He's got the footwork, he's got the speed, he's got the technique. He's gone from being a puncher to a true boxer. That could also be considered his road back, because it is literally his road back to the championship. The moment he gets in that fight with Clubber Lang, it's his moment of resurrection. It's the ultimate, most most dangerous encounter. He's back. He's really cut up. Even the announcers I remember saying Balboa looks like a middleweight. It's apparent that he's a different fighter, and he's had to go to a new place to get back here. And then there is the return with the elixir, at which point he's kind of the master of two realms. Everything has come full circle. He is a man who has walked in both the ordinary world and in the world of the incredible, the highest mountaintops of athleticism. Okay. Rocky 1 through 3, that's pretty much a complete arc. You have all of those things. Rocky 4 rings hollow on most of those counts. And again, and the reason I point this out as kind of a stereotypical journey is 1 through 3 is also the stereotypical journey of a sporting champion. And again, it's one that you could attach to a lot of other fighters, a lot of other teams, a lot of competitors. At not too many points have athletes had to go and avenge the death of their comrades. It just does. There's avenging a loss, sure. You maybe have somebody who goes out there and says, "You beat my training partner, you beat my mentor, and now I'm coming to beat you." Something like that. But at not too many points does somebody want to step back into the ring or the cage or whatever, because apparently stop, he's already dead doesn't translate into Russian. That is where it ceases to really be something that you can invest in. And hey, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that Jonas digs it. It is the simplest of the stories to understand. And if nothing else, as long as we're going to stretch on looking for value, I will give it this much. As bad as Rocky V was, there's a certain argument by which we couldn't have gotten to the franchise redemptions that were Rocky Balboa, Creed, and Creed II without first going through this movie. And ultimately, Stallone did get to tell that story of what happened to Drago after that fight. It was Creed II. So in a way, that was Stallone getting to make the Rocky sequel that, all things considered, he probably should have been allowed to make, or even not allowed to, because it was an initial idea, just one that he kind of scrapped. It was the one that he should have made instead of fucking making Rocky V. But that's about where the redeeming value starts to run out. Aesthetically, yes, it is an extremely pleasing movie. It really is. At that point, it was Stallone at the most articulate that he had ever been, which up to that point was not saying a whole lot. But you really kind of start to run out of compliments pretty quickly after that. Because, yeah, again, it would be great if it was just a simple revenge story. That would be fine. I'm down for a good tale of revenge. Y'all know how much I love Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and El Mariachi and Desperado. You know, the latter two, Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico especially, are revenge stories. However, a revenge story just really wasn't necessary in Rocky's arc. It just felt out of place. Like they were really reaching for ideas.
Let me object to the word necessary. None of this is necessary. It becomes a matter of what is an entertaining story.
Entertaining, yes, but it just didn't feel like a natural part of Rocky's arc at most points. It simply didn't. You could, hell, all things considered, if we're talking about what was necessary, you could have probably just ended the franchise after Rocky 2, been done with it, and that would have been more than likely okay. That would have been satisfying. That would have been an ending we could have all lived with. But
God, isn't that what we say about most franchises? Like, the story is told, stop doing it, and then somebody points to the balance sheet and they go, "Oh, okay, we'll keep mining for gold."
Yeah, it really is. And every so often, a franchise comes along where you think, God, what ideas could you possibly have left? And then we'll go and see the one that we're sure is going to be, one toke over the line. And we end up actually going, fuck me, that was not half bad. It's like the point when Vin Diesel had the idea to revive the Fast and the Furious. As it turned out, he had a decent idea for, number one, how to get the whole gang back together. Number two, how to reinvent the franchise. And number three, how to actually kind of have it all somehow kind of sort of make sense. In this case, it was padding. It was taking a perfectly fine 3-act structure of a saga and then just pinning on a completely unnecessary fourth one. It's entertaining in a so bad it's good kind of way, but in a franchise that had really produced 3 classic to very good movies up to that point, so bad it's having a chapter that's so bad it's good actually kind of feels kind of tragic to its overall legacy. And with that, that's all I have to say about Rocky IV.
In all honesty, I think that's all that needs to be said about Rocky IV. It's one of those where it either appeals to you or it doesn't. The simplicity of the tale either works, or I mean, I like your argument in the sense of, don't we want something more for this character that we treasure? And some people would say, no. Can we punch more minorities in the face? And I think that's my argument here. It's like Rocky IV is this visceral sort of feel good about yourself movie, to where it's like those dark sort of feelings about others, where you're just like, whatever it is, the Russian is kind of a stand-in for whatever it is you don't like, and you just want to punch it in the face over and over and over again. And I think that's why people keep coming back to it. I think if Rocky IV hadn't been made, that movie would be Rocky III. And Clubber Lang would be that stand-in for that thing that you don't like. But Drago works so much better because fucking Clubber Lang was at least a character. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. He's not. And I probably could have said this in my defense, but I think Drago works really well as kind of what I said about Kevin Costner's Robin Hood. He's sort of this empty vessel that you can put anything into. It's a little harder to do that with Clubber Lang. Well, yeah, like I said, especially with and that was. That was not me reaching with that point. With Clubber, you kind of, after a while, go, I think I like him now. Yeah, I see your point, sir. But that being said, I think it's funny. After these theme weeks, we get to the On Trial is usually the fourth show, and from the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury fiasco to now, it's like I really feel like I've said enough about this subject that I am willing to put this to bed for a while. I'm good with this. So,
You're talking about boxing in general or Rocky?
both. You know, the thing I spend a week immersed in this stuff, and then after that week, I'm like, okay, I need something else now. I need to go in a different direction. I need to wear a different shirt. So,
yeah, it's about how I feel by the time I get done with playing a game on Twitch. You know, usually because for a very similar reason. Because usually by the time it's done, I play most of these games in about 2, sometimes 3 or 4 hour increments if I'm feeling, you know, really, really good. And so instead of beating some games in a long weekend, like 3-4 days, I end up playing them for a couple of weeks. And by the time I'm done, don't get me wrong, I still loved playing the game, but I'm just going, guys, don't even ask me to play anything from this franchise for a few weeks. Maybe let's make it a few months, because I'm not saying I don't want to. It was that way when I finished Wolfenstein: The New Order. It was such an intense game. I spent so long on the last section of it on stream. I was practically weeping with joy when I finally beat that last boss fight. And I told my audience, I said, guys, I'll get to the old blood, I'll get to the new Colossus, but don't even fucking ask me for at least about a year. We're done with the Nazis for a while.
So we're going to put away our boxing gloves for a while, and next week we put on our Christmas sweaters. That's
Yay.
right. Jingle all the way, ladies and gentlemen. I will be prosecuting, Sean will be defending, and a lot of fun will be had. That's actually going to happen next Tuesday on the 11th. But the fun doesn't end there. We have our Castlevania TV party tonight on Thursday. Now, you might be asking yourself, all right, well, what happened? When's the next on trial? You've done 3 in a row. Are you going to go 4? No, God, no. After Jingle All the Way, we're done for the year. That's how we're wrapping up 2018. But 2019 looks like this. Okay, here's the schedule so far. We've got a on trial for Judgment Night. By the way, I'm defending that. I'm just going to call I'm defending right now.
I've never seen it, so
there you go.
I have no idea what I'm in for.
You're in for the greatest movie soundtrack of all time. Second only to Rocky IV. January 10th is Judgment Night. February 7th is Pan's Labyrinth, and then we can just switch back. I'll prosecute, you can defend. March, we're doing an on trial for Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed.
Oh, God.
We are taking a break from the long. We're not taking a break from Montreal. We're actually going to do. We're bringing back Long Road to Ruin announcement.
Yay!
But just for select shows, hither and thither, we're going to do one for Hellboy, 2004 and 2008, on April 18th, and then we're going to do. This was a fan recommendation. Andrew Graham wanted us to do the Three Musketeers from. I can't remember what year this is, and I didn't write it down. But the Three Musketeers movie from, I think it was the 90s. So we'll be doing an on trial for that on April 30th. In May...
I was gonna say, my mind blanked for a second. I went, wait, how are we doing Long Road to Ruin, Three Musketeers? That was one movie.
3 people, 1 movie.
Math is hard.
We'll be doing a Long Road to Ruin for John Wick on May 23rd, and that's the same week as the new John Wick movie that we'll be doing a Damn You Hollywood for. In June, assuming they don't move the fucking movie on me again, the same week as Dark Phoenix, we'll be doing an on trial for X-Men 3: The Last Stand, because I really thought we gave it. We'll be doing 2 on trials in a row, as a matter of fact. We're doing one for the Matthew Broderick Godzilla for 1998. And then the following week, we're doing X-Men 3: The Last Stand, because we did not give it nearly as much time as it deserved when we did The Long Road to Ruin.
No.
Moving right along, Footloose and Fancy Free. Nothing in July, but August 1st, we'll be doing an on-trial for Pulp Fiction. In August, August 29th, the same week that we'll be reviewing the Swamp Thing that's on the DC Universe app, we're going to look at the 1982 Swamp Thing movie.
God, I have not seen that in a while.
Yeah, stab in the boob. That's what I remember.
I don't even remember that much.
Okay, this was another ask from our good friend from our Canadian office, Andrew Graham. September 2019, 13 hours. And Andrew Graham is going to step into that show. I haven't quite figured out how we're going to do this yet. I think he wanted to prosecute it, which would make you defend it, and I think I was just going to play host and judge on that one. But Andrew Graham steps into the courtroom on September 17th, and we're going to do 13 hours at his request. October.
I had to pause for a second because I got my movies with the word hours mixed up, and I thought I briefly mistook it for the 25th hour. Because fuck yeah, I love that movie.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of shows in October. We're going to be doing a Long Road to Ruin for the trilogy From Dusk Till Dawn. We've been waiting forever to do that, and we're like, we don't want to put it off any longer. We'll be doing an on trial for the DC animated feature Gotham by Gaslight, and we'll be doing an on trial for Keanu Reeves' Constantine on Halloween. That's our Halloween plans for that year. In November, we'll be doing a no on trials as of yet. We may schedule one, but for right now, there's nothing on the schedule. But we are doing a Long Road to Ruin for the Kingsman.
Sweet.
And finally, come December, well, it's Christmas time in Hollis, Queens, and it's time for Sean to pick a movie. So next December, 2019, Sean gets to pick the holiday feature.
Woohoo!
And so that's it. What do you think? What do you think of the calendar for next year, Sean?
I like it. There's some interesting stuff in here that I wouldn't have thought of. It's outside the box, but I at least know that I'm going to get to watch a whole bunch of new movies.
Oh, good. All right. So that's all my plugs for now. I've plugged next year. I've plugged next week. Go ahead and do your plugs, and let's get out of here.
Okay, guys. You can, as always, find me on Twitter at Comer Codex. You can find me on Instagram on the same handle. And just to go for the natural Hattie, you can also find me a whole lot more often lately now on Twitch. I've recommitted myself to this whole streaming thing, and I am at twitch.tv/Comer Codex. Most recently, I have been playing Batman Arkham Knight. We're about midway through the full story mode on that one. After that, not entirely sure what we're going to be playing, but I may intersperse it with some Overwatch or Dead by Daylight. And I recently picked up a new co-host, my friend and yours, the Film Twit, Cole Marintet. We're going to be streaming on each other's channels because we realize we can kick far more ass together than two small streamers ever could alone. In fact, most recently, if you want the guaranteed time to catch me, I'll be playing Batman Arkham Knight tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time, and at 7 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, Cole and I will be getting together on both of our channels to play Monster Hunter World, which is our new recurring weekly series. And otherwise, thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you, and never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, court is now in recess. We'll see you again next week for Jingle All the Way. In the meantime, for Sean, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.